Hello, everyone. Happy Saturday. Thank you so much for joining us for Black Writers Read. We are starting season 3 today. My name is Nicole M. Young Martin, and I serve as the producer and host for the series. And I'm coming to you from my home office in Northern Connecticut, where the beginnings of fall are slowly starting to emerge. They're not emerging fast enough for me because this is my favorite season. The pumpkin spice drinks are available. Yet the weather hasn't gotten the memo. Here in Connecticut, it's about high 80s and it's extremely humid. So that's why you got the really big hair today, which is actually appropriate for our episode. And just FYI for people, I love fall. I love sweaters. I love pumpkin and apple. I love fall foliage here in New England. And most importantly, another reason why I love the fall, it's my birthday. My birthday is in October. Hint, hint, for all of you that are joining us today. Black Writers Read showcases, celebrates, and honors the words, work, and traditions of Black writers from across the country, across genres, across experiences, and across the African diaspora. Black Writers Read is a behind-the-scenes conversation into the craft and what it means to create as a Black author in today's society. Since starting the series during the summer of 2020, we've hosted now over 40 authors representing various genres, including children's books, young adult fiction, poetry, urban creative nonfiction, memoir, history, horror, essays, food and culture, and people from around the globe, including Western Massachusetts, Los Angeles, Washington, D.C., Seattle, Washington, upstate New York, Vermont, Cambridge, Massachusetts, and Portugal. Since we were last together this past June, the audio podcast version of Black Writers Read launched. This summer, I posted retrospectives, which were recaps from some of my favorite past interviews, along with some bonus episodes. I also had the amazing opportunity and the privilege to collaborate with Attack Bear Press, Radio Plasma, and Bookwoman, which is actually an independent feminist bookstore based in Austin, Texas. I love that Black Writers Read is legit spanning across the country to host other writers of color for virtual book launches. This episode of Black Writers Read is the first to join the new catalog, both for the live stream series and the audio podcast. The audio podcast for these episodes forthcoming will be available every other Tuesday via Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and Amazon Music. I have so many of you to thank for contributing to the Indiegogo campaign for season 2. Other contributors, including I got individual sponsorships and cash gifts over the summer, and just so much love, even especially for those who share my posts via social media. It means so much. So thank you so much for being a part of my community. Season 3 will be unique for people who have been following, as I am scheduled to host authors at least twice a month. I'm trying it. It's going to be a lot, but I'm really excited. So I'm excited to take on this task. If you would like a peek at what's forthcoming, check out my live stream on Facebook and YouTube from last night, where I offer the behind-the-scenes look at season 3. I'm looking forward to collaborating with organizations from across the country to bring you a variety of authors representing various genres and experiences and a part of the African diaspora. So I'm excited to get today's conversation started. Today, we welcome filmmaker, photographer, activist, and author St. Clair Detrick-Jules joining us from Washington, D.C. Today, we gather to celebrate the 1-year anniversary of her book, My Beautiful Black Hair, 101 Natural Hair Stories from the Sisterhood. I had to showcase my afro, which was released on September 28th, 2021, and is available in the United States, Australia, the United Kingdom, and Canada, wherever books are sold. St. Clair Detrick-Jules is an award-winning filmmaker, photographer, author, activist, and public speaker. She captures personal stories and intimate moments centering Black liberation, immigrant justice, and women's rights. An Afro-Caribbean artist who remains rooted in her community, St. Clair grounds her work in radical love, joy, and the knowledge that a more just world is possible. St. Clair has a BA from Brown University in French and Francophone Studies. She has been featured in The Washington Post, Washingtonian Magazine, BuzzFeed News, The Christian Science Monitor, Birdie, and NPR's Strange Fruit, among others. Her documentary, Documented, has received awards at Immigration Film Fest, Baltimore International Black Film Festival, Ogden City Latino Film Festival, and Cornell University Centrally Isolated Film Festival. Her book, My Beautiful Black Hair, which was published by Chronicle Books last year in September, showcases the photographs and stories of Black women embracing their crowns. St. Clair currently resides in her hometown of Washington, D.C. Please visit her website to learn more about her, which is St. Clair Detrick-Jules, all one word.com. Today's episode is presented in collaboration with Levy Break Lit. Thank you so much to Lisa Pingram and her company for the continued partnership. Which, by the way, be sure to check out Lisa for her very own Black Writers Read episode in January. She is an amazing, amazing award-winning poet, and I'm extremely blessed that we will be able to host her on this platform. For those who are new to Black Writers Read, here's the format of our show. First, St. Clair will show excerpts from her work. Afterwards, we'll engage in a conversation, and then we'll open it up to Q&A to all of our viewers. We have viewers joining us from both Facebook and YouTube today. If you have a question, please feel free to include it in the comments section on the platform where you're joining us from today. I will compile the questions and pose them to St. Clair following our conversation. I'd like to now bring St. Clair onto the virtual stage. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me.
I absolutely I'm just in awe of you and also your work. I had a chance to read the book and see the amazing photographs, and it just made me like, I've been natural now for 10 years, and it just made me even more prouder of my hair and also my heritage. So I thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. That really means a lot to me. I appreciate it.
Cool. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you. Have fun.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So I know we're going to talk about this more in the interview, but just to preface it a little bit, my book, My Beautiful Black Hair, is dedicated to my little sister. And so here is a picture of her. And so really quickly, the background is just that she was being bullied for her afro. And so I created this to show her that her hair is beautiful. I know we'll talk more about that later. But I just wanted to start with that because I'm going to share a letter that I wrote for Chloe at the beginning of this book. So here is my letter, which is the first excerpt that I'm going to read. Dear Chloe, my beautiful, powerful little sister. When I was 18, a couple months before I started college, you burst into this world, a bundle of energy ready to take up space and radiate love. You are so full of life, Chloe, so it seems only fitting that your hair is equally alive. Your afro reaches for the sun, and the sun grazes its tips. When you run on the beach, tracing the outlines of recent waves, your hair becomes alive. It bounces and dances and sings. Your hair hugs your face, holds it tight, whispers in your ear to remind you that you are the descendant of Africans, of Africa. You and I have different white mothers, but we are connected by our Black father, by our Black ancestors, brought from Africa in chains to the Caribbean. The power, the strength, the eventual liberation of our ancestors live within us. I am grateful for our Blackness, because our Blackness makes us powerful, makes us sisters. When Dad called to tell me you were ashamed of your afro, I became furious at the world for making you feel this way. Some people say that change must be gradual, that Black girls with natural hair must be patient as the media slowly but surely begins giving us a hint of representation here and there. But I don't believe in gradual change. So I took matters into my own hands because you matter and you deserve to know today that your natural crown is beautiful. So I want to lead by example. I want to teach you how to love yourself by loving myself, by introducing you to other Black women who love themselves. As Black women, we have to stop waiting for the world to love us, and we have to start loving ourselves unconditionally. Chloe, I want you to know that I love you unconditionally. But more importantly, I want you to love yourself unconditionally. Your sister, St. Clair. So that's the letter that I wrote for Chloe. And I'm going to read next a couple letters that some of the women who I interviewed have dedicated to Chloe. So this book, it's not just me, it's 101 Black women who have shared their own stories and have also, many of them have written little notes to my sister Chloe, and by extension to all little Black girls and all, everyone in our community who has ever felt like they are not enough in their bodies. So next, I'm going to read another letter. Here we go. And for the visual, this is the woman who wrote it. Her name is Elise. She wrote, "Dear Chloe, you stand on the shoulders of great women. We are the first. All life came out of Africa. And your hair is a symbol and representation of a greatness that is yours to tap into. When you wear your hair in its natural state, you're tapping into greatness. And those of us whose ancestors survived the Middle Passage, we're survivors. We have some powerful genes. Nothing to play with. Your sister, Elise." And I'm going to read another letter from another woman in the book. Her name is Asha, and here's her photo. She wrote, "Dear Chloe, I've been in your shoes. Even though I was raised to love my kinky hair and my Afrocentric features, what I was seeing in the media and at school still influenced me. And I believed that my hair had to look more Eurocentric in order for it to be considered good hair. Thank God I'm out of that phase now, though. I'm praying for you and all the young girls who are where I was when I was growing up. Chloe, you are so cute. I hope to meet you one day. But I want to let you know that your hair is absolutely gorgeous the way it is. It's already blossoming and flourishing. Just know that your hair is beautiful, and it's exactly what it's supposed to look like. And just like a tree, your hair needs to be watered and hugged and nurtured in order for it to flourish. So speak life into it. Your natural hair is God's cotton. Your sister, Asha." I'm going to read one more letter, and then I'm going to read a couple other excerpts from the book. All right. Here's the picture. And this letter is short. "Dear Chloe, you should touch your hair every morning and tell it that it's beautiful because it comes out of you. Your ancestors gave you that gift of curly, big, puffy hair, and it would be a disservice to them not to love your curls. Your sister, Daniele." So those are a few of the letters that people wrote for Chloe. And now I'm just going to read a couple excerpts from people's own hair stories. So the first one is here. Oops. There we go. And this is what she said. "Growing up, my hair was my biggest insecurity. I wanted to look like the girls at my predominantly white middle school, so I straightened my hair to try to fit in. I went through a lot of depression because of it. But now my hair is an automatic confidence booster. When I walk into a room, I stand out because of my hair. And if I'm having a bad day, somebody's going to compliment me and it's going to make me feel better. Or even if I'm not in the mood to talk, somebody's going to come up to me and talk to me about my hair. And I really like that." Kennedy. This next excerpt is from this woman right here, the one in the middle in the pink dress. "My mom started relaxing my hair probably when I was like 3. I used to have kitty perms, so I spent the majority of my childhood with relaxed hair. Looking back on the damage to my hair, I get so stressed. When I got into high school, I started thinking more critically about my Blackness, about beauty. And I just got really fed up and took some scissors and cut off all my hair. I remember the day before coming to school with my little afro and just being nervous. I look back on it and I'm like, that's so wild. that my hair growing out of my head the way that it was naturally was so nerve-wracking for me. The summer after my first year of college, I locked my hair. So now here I am. I love having locked hair. And honestly, this is the healthiest it's been in my entire life, and it's just doing its own thing. So I'm gonna let it do its own thing. That's my journey. And any words I have to say to young Black girls? You are beautiful. You are seen. Whatever negative comments anyone has to say, just know that you're gonna grow into a beautiful, intelligent, smart woman. And they're gonna be looking at you like, wow, I feel so ashamed that I teased this person whose beauty is so unique. Because there's so much beauty in Blackness, and that deserves to be celebrated. I know it's hard, but don't give up. Loving yourself is a process. If you fail one day, there's always tomorrow. You'll get there. And then I'm just going to read 2 more passages. Here is a picture of the next woman. And she wrote, I had just started attending a new private Christian school that was predominantly white, and I joined the swim team, so I was getting my hair wet every day. I was the only person of color in my grade, and I wanted to fit in, so I straightened my hair every day before school. Then one morning, I was running late, and I couldn't get my hair straight the way I wanted it to be, and my mom was already tired of me straightening my hair all the time. So she just said, go stick your hair under the faucet. You're not going to be happy with it all day, and you're going to get it wet this evening at swim practice anyways. So just get it wet now and wear it curly. So I did. And I went to my school with my hair curly, and I was really nervous about it. I got into my first period about 15 minutes late that morning, and there was a commotion because my white classmates had never seen hair like this. They couldn't focus on anything except for my hair. They thought it was funny to throw paper balls in my hair and see if they would stick. I finished first period, went to second period, and then on my way to third period, the headmaster stopped me in the hallway. He was with the principal and the dean of discipline. He told me, I'm glad you're adjusting well here. I really like your fluff today, but I've just gotten emails today from your teachers about your hair. So apparently, teachers were writing in because my hair was an unnatural hairstyle, and it had become a distraction to my classmates. Your hair is actually against dress code, he said. My natural hair, according to my white teachers, was an unnatural hairstyle, and therefore it was against dress code. At first, I thought the headmaster was joking. I laughed and tried to walk away, but he said, no, really, you can't go to class. I need you to come to my office. They called my mom into the office too. She asked me what I'd done to get in trouble. I didn't do anything, I said. I didn't straighten my hair this morning. She started laughing because she thought it was a joke, but my headmaster was serious. I wasn't allowed to go to the rest of my classes that day. I didn't really start loving my hair until 5 years ago when I moved to Washington, D.C. It has a completely different demographic than other places I've been, and you see women with the biggest hair here. I even saw Angela Davis speak when I was working at Busboys and Poets. So being around other people who look like me has helped a lot. So that's Kamara's journey. And then I'm just going to read one more quickly. Okay. And this is a photo of this last woman. So she said, I was born in Puerto Rico, but I grew up in Anderson, Ohio, which is a very white suburb. I was the only brown kid at school, and I used to get made fun of for having natural hair. My classmates would rip out my ponytail holder. They would physically take out my hair tie, just to see my hair out and make fun of my nappy hair. They'd also pet it, which felt castrating. So I used to hate my hair. I used to be like, oh my God, I'm going to shave it all off. I can't deal with the bullying. I felt really stuck at that school because I didn't connect with those people anyways, and I knew that it wasn't my place. But I told myself that I wasn't going to cry and stay upset and care so much about what my classmates thought of me when we clearly just had two different ways of living. You know what I mean? I was an artsy kid and I was always doing shows and stuff like that. I never went to the sleepovers. So that helped, you know? Ballet was like this little refuge for me. Focusing on what I was passionate about helped me put things into perspective and realize that I could rise above their bullying and their ignorance. Because I was doing greater things, things that I felt happy about. I've connected with people from all over the world through dance. And why would I be alive other than to share my life on this earth with others? That's kind of how I look at it. I don't see purpose in life if you're not doing something that truly empowers you. It's what my soul needs. So that's the final passage that I'll read for now. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, St. Clair, for that. That was amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah, so let's launch into the questions. And again, for those who are joining us, please feel free to drop questions in your respective comment sections, and I'll hold them to the end to post to our guest. So, St. Clair, the first question I have for you is, I always like to start the conversation with the book's origin story. So you shared a little bit in terms of your sister and how that story inspired this book. Can you talk a little bit more about how My Black Beautiful Hair emerged?
Yeah. So, I was finishing up my last semester of college, got this phone call from my dad, who lives in France with my siblings. And he told me that one of my little sisters, Chloe, was being bullied at her school because of her afro. And at first I got really angry. And then I realized my anger, it's justified, but it's not going to help her love her natural hair. And so I decided I wanted to give her representation, because I think, this is a common story that I've heard from a lot of people in the book as well. My sister is one of those Black kids who is growing up in a predominantly white community and goes to a predominantly white school. And, another component, I think, is that our family, most of our Black families in the Caribbean. So we're a bit disconnected in that way. And so I was like, my sister really isn't seeing Black women, right, with natural hair. She isn't seeing that representation. She doesn't have people who look like her around her. And so I wanted to give her that representation. And that's what led me to create this photojournalism book. And I never wanted to be an author. That was never a dream of mine or anything, but it just sort of happened that way. And I got really into photojournalism, and I was going to self-publish, but then I was lucky enough to find an agent and get it published through Chronicle Books. And so they, really helped me with formatting and layout and everything. And that's how it came to be.
Aww. I love that it's a love letter to your sister, and that's some of the things that I was seeing as I was reading other people's reviews and feedback on the book. So I love that. There is power in naming. Each chapter has a specific name. So for people who are joining us, I just wanted to share a couple of titles of the chapters and how they progress. So we have The Big Chop, Going Natural, Embracing Blackness, Hair as Identity, Self-Love, Self-Discovery, Sisterhood, Mothers and Daughters, White Spaces, Liberation. So there is a particular progression and a particular narrative arc. So can you talk about the process of curating this literary space and constructing the narrative? There are some very deeply personal stories with photos of each contributor accompanying the work. How are you able to get each participant to share these stories in this way? Which came first, especially since you're a photographer, the photograph of the story? And then can you offer us a brief tour of the creative process?
Yes, absolutely. So when I first started working on this book, I didn't envision it, being something like this that would be published and everything. My original thought was just that I would be creating something for Chloe, like a little booklet or a little pamphlet or something like that. And so I just reached out to a few friends, Black women with natural hair, and said, hey, I'm doing this project for my sister. Can I, interview you about your natural hair journey and take a couple photos of you? And I will say also that I was really inspired by Humans of New York. For anyone who follows Humans of New York on Facebook or Instagram, he has this amazing blog where he photographs people all over New York and now all over the world, and he'll just ask them questions about their lives. And so I really liked that format of having a visual representation of someone along with their story, because I think as humans we do crave that connection, right? And we have this longing to know about each other, I think. So I decided I wanted to use that format. Like I said, I started just by reaching out to a couple friends and asking them if I could include them in this project that I was working on. And then the more interviews I did, the more I realized this is actually really fun. And everyone's hair journey is just so different, right? I mean, of course, there are similarities in terms of the big chop and things like that, and discrimination and stuff, but the details of everyone's hair journey are just so different. And so I didn't want to stop the interviews. And so then I said, okay, I'll do 50 interviews. And then I got to 50 and I wanted to keep going. So then I went to 100, and then it ended up being 101.
Nice.
And, at first I was just reaching out to my friends, and then I started reaching out to friends of friends. And then, there's a big natural hair community on Instagram. So I started reaching out to people who I didn't actually know. And I said, hey, I'm doing this project for my little sister. I gave them some background, said, would you be a part of it? And I was so overwhelmed with their kindness, right? To offer their time to me and to offer me their stories, right? Even though they didn't know me, they didn't know my sister, but they said, yes, I want to be a part of this to help this little Black girl love herself, right? And a lot of them had been in Chloe's shoes before. So that was sort of how I went around getting subjects for the book. And then for the interviews themselves, I would say I'm trying to think if I usually took the photos first or if I did the interviews first. I think it just I guess I usually took the photos first. And then I asked them a couple questions about their hair journey. And for the creative process for the interviews, it was always really open-ended. And the more interviews I did, the more I was able to build off past interviews, right? This person said they experienced this. Do you relate to that at all, right? And so that helped also. But for the most part, I would just say, can you talk about anything related to your hair journey or your Blackness or your womanhood, right? And I sort of give them free reign to do that. And everyone's journey is unique, I would say. So that was my process for that. And then, when I first came up with the idea of this book, again, because I thought it was going to be a little pamphlet, so I didn't have this idea of having different sections or anything like that. I just thought it would be, a few pages for my sister. But once I started getting up there with my interviews and the photos, I realized, okay, I should probably have different sections. I should have chapters to sort of organize it a bit. And just based on what people had already said, I maybe had about 50 interviews at this point. And so I was looking at all my interviews and I said, hey, okay, based on these, interviews, let me come up with some themes that I'm seeing again and again. So, mothers and daughters, sisterhood, liberation, white spaces, all of these themes. And that's how I put them together into chapters. And so it really wasn't, I think it felt really natural, right? It wasn't like I was trying to force these interviews into certain categories. It was, I had half the interviews done first, and then I came up with the categories after that, and then adjusted it, of course, once I was done with all of the interviews. And in terms of the order, right? So the first chapter is the big chop / going natural. And so I felt like that was a good place to start, because that's sort of the origin of the natural hair journey, right? Is going natural, because most of the women who I interviewed had at some point gotten a relaxer. Most of the women who I interviewed. And so I felt like that was a good place to start. So there's going natural, and then there's embracing Blackness. And I think for a lot of the women who I interviewed, that goes hand in hand, right? Learning to love your hair and learning to love the color of your skin, right? And your culture. And then there are other chapters, right? So hair is identity, then self-love, sisterhood, mothers and daughters. Then there's white spaces, which is the second to last chapter. And then after white spaces, the final chapter is liberation. And so I wanted to end with liberation, because I really like this idea that we are free, right? And even if some people don't feel free, right, it's possible to be free from these chains of white supremacist beauty standards, I would say. And so I want to, it's important to acknowledge all of the discrimination that we face, right? And a lot of that comes up in white spaces, people who go to predominantly white schools or work in predominantly white environments or grow up in predominantly white communities. We need those stories, right? It's important for us to share the discrimination that and I also wanted to end on a joyful note, thinking about the next generation, thinking about my little sister, hey, you don't have to live in this paradigm. Like, we can have a paradigm shift, and we can create a world in which we're liberated from any of these beauty standards, right? And we can feel free and happy and enough in our own skin and with our own hair.
Nice. And speaking of that, a couple of days ago at the White House, President Obama and First Lady Michelle Obama's portraits were revealed. And I watched it live on YouTube. And one of the things I noticed, I was like, wait, does Michelle have her hair braided? Yeah, I was like, she had her hair braided. And it was just so like affirming to be like, she's wearing braids in the White House. So just putting those two together, especially given like the history of like Americana and like politics and all of that, and also too watching her journey progressing from this very prominent leader in the community to becoming a first lady, and now falling more into her, I don't think she's ever given herself these titles, but activist, philanthropist, and then watching her hair take this kind of journey too has been extremely affirming, extremely affirming.
Yeah, it has been. I saw pictures of her there as well, and I was really happy about it, because it shows other Black women that that's a professional, beautiful hairstyle as well.
Yeah, exactly. So one of my favorite praises for your book comes from Elizabeth Acevedo, who's one of my favorite authors. There is a community's love letter to Chloe, but it is also a self-reflective love note, an effort to agitate social constructs that have told all Black women that the bodies we are born into are not enough. The images are glorious, the anecdotes at times tender, at times seething. The entire book is powerful. Going into your work as a photographer now, can you talk about the composition of the photos? Because what I love is it's not just, like portrait style of just the head and the hair. You see bodies, you see presence, you see attitudes, you see personalities. And so I love that. So a couple of questions along these lines. Can you talk about the composition of the photos of My Beautiful Black Hair? What is the importance of constructing this particular narrative through images, especially when there are words that accompany the photos in the book? Because I feel like they can both stand alone, but I think one opens, like I think the photo opens the door to the text.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good question. So I think that it's one thing to hear someone's story, but it's another thing to look at someone and almost be in someone's presence, even if it's just on the page. And so images, I think, are really important to me. And again, part of my process was thinking about, okay, what will my little sister take from this, right? So I was also thinking about people, who might not be able to get through all the words, but will at least have that photographic representation. But I do think, even like you mentioned, Michelle Obama wearing braids, I think we need that visual representation, right? It's almost like a mirror for Black women, so we can see, oh, she's beautiful, right? I see that she's beautiful, and therefore I'm beautiful too, right? We can see our own beauty reflected in these images is my hope, right? Whenever we see images of other Black women embracing themselves. And I did also want to show, I'm really glad that you said that you can tell different attitudes from the pictures and different bodies and everything, because I also wanted to show that there's just not one, there's not just one type of Black woman who has natural hair, right? And so the women who I interviewed, the only thing everyone has in common is that they wear natural hair, but I mean, they're all different ages. They come from all different walks of life. They're, you know, some of them are Americans, some of them are immigrants. They're from different states. They have different jobs. You know, there's students in there. There are activists in there, engineers, right? All these different fields, doctors. And I think that really goes, you know, hopefully I also wanted to show that it doesn't matter, you know, what field you're in, or, you know, it's not like natural hair is only for one type of Black woman, right? I wanted to show it's for everybody, whether you're an activist, whether you're in corporate America, whatever it is. It's always a beautiful and professional hairstyle, to say the least. And, you know, I did want to show also different body types, different skin tones. And even though I was really only asking women about their hair, there were a couple women who talked about, you know, one woman talked about how she, you know, learning to love her body, her weight, and learning to love her hair went sort of hand in hand, right? Because I think it's all part of loving yourself more deeply. And so it's hard to separate the love we have for our hair with the love we have for the rest of ourselves. There was another woman who talked about learning to love her darker skin tone, right? And how that went along with learning to love her natural hair. So I did want to show also, you know, even though this book is focused on hair, I also wanted to show that all of our bodies are beautiful as well. And then there were a couple photos that I took in particular that I'll share that were taken in particular places. And I know, you know, maybe everybody won't recognize this, but for example, because I live in DC, so a lot of these women are in DC. So this is the African American History Museum here in DC. And I wanted to sort of take this photo from below because I feel like that adds power to it. And I think that you know, this is such a significant landmark for a lot of us. And so I wanted to include that museum somewhere in there. There was another woman who I photographed in front of the Apollo Theater in.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I, you know, sometimes it was just, oh, let's meet in the park and I'll take your picture. But then there were some landmarks that I, you know, knew that I wanted to include in the book, just to sort of add this element of embracing everything that comes with Blackness, including our culture and our history.
Yes, I'm actually going to skip around questions because you mentioned living in DC, which I still have not been to the African American History Museum yet. I gotta go.
Yeah, it's really tough, but it's an incredible place.
Yeah, because me and a friend of mine, we want to go, and we were like, can we like skip the middle pack? Because we know how that story go. Can we not do the basement? Can we start up? Because I think you start at the top and then you come down. So it's like, can we start at the second or third level?
Yeah, because the basement level it's tough. It's and it's even, you know, what we were saying, you know, it's one thing I think to read about the Middle Passage and learn about it, but then when you actually see, you know, the artifacts that they have, the chains and all that stuff, it's just it's a whole other level.
Yeah. So our environments and communities can inform our creative practice. You grew up in Washington, D.C., which is very similar to where I grew up. I'm originally from Detroit, but D.C. got the title of Chocolate City and not Detroit, so I'm a little jealous about that. And actually, D.C. is one of my favorite cities. I've been there I don't know how many times, and I actually wanted to live there. So I love that the lovely moniker of Chocolate City, given its diverse, they're very diverse and prominent Black communities. And I say that in the plural because I don't know if a lot of people who, you know, listen and watch Black writers read, but DC is extremely diverse. You have a very, you know, prominent African American community, you have a Jamaican community, you have other parts of the diaspora represented in DC as well. So how does living, and you were born and raised and you're still in the DC area, how does living in a city where Black identity is affirmed in various ways, how does that inform your work?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think sometimes we don't, sometimes I think we're not grateful for the things that we have, or we don't recognize that other people don't have them. So I remember one time when I was little, I remember my mom told me, that the majority of Americans were white. And I was like, whoa, no, the majority of Americans are Black, because look at our neighborhood.
Yeah.
So I am really, really grateful that my mom was intentional, because, my mom is white and my dad is Afro-Caribbean. And so my mom actually really wanted to make sure that I grew up in a Black neighborhood in DC. There's been a lot of gentrification. So now some people call DC Chocolate Chip City. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Chocolate Chip City?
Yeah, because the gentrification is just ridiculous. But yeah, my mom definitely made an effort. And so looking back, and especially when I talk to people who grew up in majority white communities, I just feel so grateful that I was able to grow up around people who look like me. And I am really grateful for that. But then I also went to a majority white elementary school in DC. And so that also impacted me a lot, because before first grade, I went to a majority Black elementary or kindergarten, in DC, and I wanted my hair braided like the other little Black girls, all that stuff. I would have Afrocentric clothing and all of that. And then once I got to this majority white elementary school, even though I was still living in a majority Black neighborhood, I still wanted to look like my friends. And so when I was 6 years old in first grade, that's when I really started not liking my hair. And because everybody else just had super straight hair, light skin. Everyone else was white for the most part at my school. And so that was sort of the beginning of my self-hatred journey, I guess.
Wow.
Yeah, but I do think, that being in DC, even if I didn't see myself represented in my classmates for those, 6 years, from ages 6 to 12, after that, my middle school and high school, my mom made an intentional choice again to put me in a predominantly Black and brown school. So I would be around people who look like me. And I think it didn't undo all of the self-hate that I had learned, but it was really helpful, I would say. And it taught me a lot. And again, now looking back, I feel even more grateful, right, for the experiences that I had and being able to be around people who look like me from middle and high school.
And people don't understand how pivotal that age is. So my full-time job, one of the things I do, I work with our Young Women's Initiative, and it works with young women of color and gender expansive folk age 16 to 24. And that is such a important age, because you're slowly trying to find yourself, but also you're trying to fit in with your peers. But the problem is you have so many definitions of what you should be coming from various places. And so I feel like your racial and ethnic identity should not be the thing that should always be questioned. But also, too, I'm privileged in that fact that I grew up in Detroit at a time. Now gentrification and people fleeing has changed, but it's like I went to Detroit public schools. It was very Afrocentric, so much so to where the year that the Malcolm X movie came out, I think I was like in 7th grade, they shut down the entire middle school and we all went to go see it. Like they bought an entire movie theater. So it's like, so I grew up in all of these very affirming spaces. So I'm just like, young people should not have to, one, question their identities at all. It's like they need time to find themselves. But the thing that should never be questioned or pushed is, I feel, the racial and ethnic identity pieces, because that is our foundations of who we are. Those are our building blocks. And I feel like if we're not affirmed in those, we're a hot mess. And I think this is, again, why I really appreciate the framing of this text, because it's originally a love letter to your 4-year-old sister. So it's like you're starting her off as saying, you are awesome. You're a little Black girl. I'm actually jealous of her fro. Her fro is amazing.
It is.
Yeah, her fro. I'm like, Chloe, you got some good hair going. And so I love it. And I love that it's centered around a young person, because young people, they already have enough being thrown at them. They don't need oh, I got to worry about if I'm liked because of who I am.
Yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of us, even as adults, some of those things that we hear in childhood can still stick with us. I know I still think about some of the comments that I got as a kid about my hair, and those things are still with me. So even, even thinking about the letters that people wrote to Chloe, I'm also thinking this can be used for myself as a child as well, right? I can go back and affirm my younger self too.
So this is a question I did not include, but you just made me think of it. What would you say to your younger self now after like writing and editing this book?
Yeah, I think one thing that I would emphasize is the history of our people and the power of our people, because right now I think we're in this natural hair movement, and that's amazing. But when I think about, okay, how can we make sure that this natural hair movement sticks this time, and that it's not just a fad or a fashion statement or whatever, because it's one thing to go natural when there's a lot of people around you who are natural, but what happens if fashion trends shift or whatever it is, right? How do we make sure that little Black girls still are confident in their own skin and with their own natural hair? And I think that understanding our history is really important. And the woman who wrote sort of an introduction to this book, her name is Dr. Afia Shaka, and she's a natural hairstylist and psychologist. And she actually, knows a lot and wrote in the beginning of this book about our hair traditions from our ancestors. So all the way back to when our ancestors were in Africa, and how hair, depending on the hairstyle, it could what tribe you were a part of, gender, age, marital status, whether you were in mourning. So all of these different, identity markers were denoted by hair, and that was a really big part of a lot of our ancestors' lives. Some of the hairstyles could take days, right? All of that. So I think that's important. And then also just the history, and I read one of these letters at the beginning from the woman named Elise Pant, who says that those of us whose ancestors survived the Middle Passage, I mean, that's huge. And I wish that I could go back and emphasize that to my younger self and say, hey, this is your history, right? This was everything that was done to your people, and yet you survived, right? All of your ancestors survived and fought so that you could be here today, and your hair is a gift from your ancestors, right? And after everything they've done for you, you should honor this gift that they've given you. So I think that's what I would tell my younger self. Hopefully she would understand.
So cute, a little St. Clair. And speaking of this quickly, speaking of like the hair and the ancestry, so I like get my hair colored a lot. It's right now like pink and purple, and my hairstylist, she was just like, because color like bleach and color take my hair like this, she's like, what is your ancestry? Because typically she's like, Black hair doesn't take to color this well. And I was like, I have no clue. I just know, based off of our family tree, we, we're like the most American because we've been here since, like chattel slavery. And I decided to do, and this is the first time I'm mentioning this to people because really only friends of mine and my husband know this. I recently did an ancestry DNA, and I got my DNA back, and it's super interesting. And Henry Louis Gates Jr., if you're listening or watching, I hope you pick me up as a story because it's very interesting. I have 94% Black ancestry. I was like, how is that possible? I only have 4% white ancestry, 2% Irish, 1% from Wales, 1% from England, but 94 is from the motherland. And I was just like, okay, now I want to do an even deeper dig in terms of like the beauty traditions and the hair traditions of those cultures. Like I recently started, because most of my ancestry is from like Cameroon, Congo, and Nigeria. I started looking up the weddings and things like that. And I was just like, these are things that I'm missing in the hair. And I'm just like, oh my God, I wish that slavery and like capitalism and things like that didn't take all of those important identity markers from me, because I feel like I would be a completely different person if I had access to all those things. Don't get me wrong, everyone, but it's like I'm very proud to be African American, and African American is a culture in itself. But understanding the past and what brought me here, I'm just like, why do I have to reach and pay a lot of money to get that?
Exactly.
Yeah, so speaking of that, in terms of like just the hair origins and things like that, one question I definitely wanted to bring up was about the Crown Act. And for people who don't know, the Crown Act protects against race-based hair discrimination in the workplace, in education, so on and so forth. It was first introduced in California in 2019. It's 2022. Everybody do math. Which is, I'm like, oh my God. So the Crown Act ensures that people will not be fired from a job or denied professional educational advancement. The Crown Act largely affects Black women, girls, and femme-identified folks. So far, it has only been enacted in 18 of our states. Do the math again. So how do you hope My Beautiful Black Hair contributes to